Good afternoon, everyone. I was just waiting for more people to join in. I can see that people are joining in by the minute. We will start off since we have already hit 4 o'clock. First of all, I would like to welcome Mr. Sudipto Mandal. He is the VP and CHRO at Star Cement Limited. Sudipto, welcome to HR Speak Live.
Thank you, Zubin.
So what I'll do is I'll quickly do a little bit of an introduction and then we're going to start off with the discussion. So Sudipto, by the way, as I've already told you, he is the VP and CHRO at Star Cement. He's worked with really good organizations prior to this. He was part of CRISIL, Nice India, Spencer's, Asian Paints, Oracle, and over 2 decades of experience. And he studied in the Tata Institute of Social Sciences a long time back. But, again, an institute we're all aware of, we know about this. And so, Sudipto, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a discussion about your career journey. My first question to you is, how did you start your career? We'd really love to know. I was going through a LinkedIn profile and I saw that your first experience of working, about your first experience working, and I believe that you were part of a greenfield project setup. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, you have already gone through the details. Okay. Yeah, so you are right, Zubin. This is with Eveready. That was my campus job. And we were setting up a greenfield project in Noida at the outskirts of NCR region. And way back, it was in 1998-99. Very interesting experience of that. But in one line, if I had to describe that, I would say most of my learning happens in my career in that project, and that's through unlearning. I think it's important, especially for those who are starting their career, or the students also, that I had a very different idea about what the corporate world is all about. There are a lot of theories that we had learned, a lot of exposures, or a lot of people came and spoke about different concepts, to different theories. But when you actually get into work, then you see that your life experience is extremely important, and you have to do a constant switching between what you learn and what you unlearn. So, and there is a perfect amalgamation between these two. So you cannot take these two things in isolation. That means what you have learned, you cannot just copy paste that in your work environment, but what you are learning in your experience, that you cannot say that this is very different, I can't reflect. So you have to constantly reflect about what you have learned, and then you have to apply that on your job. So very briefly, I have to tell, this is the time when I saw that in a greenfield project, I mean, of course, this was not only just my first greenfield project experience, but this was my first experience of working as well. It was, I remember it was a kind of a project where we just had probably one wall of where the project said it was coming up. So extreme winter or extreme summer, the way we worked in terms of setting up or erecting the construction, that was very important. And slowly we started recruiting people, and we were very careful that we didn't want to invite any unnecessary IR hazards. So we recruited from all over the neighboring states, but not so much from Noida and Uttar Pradesh. We went to Haryana, we went to Rajasthan, we went to UP, we went to Uttaranchal, Himachal, even from Bengal. So these young ITI workmen, they came in and they were imbibed into this new culture, and how they actually created a very conducive and probably, I would say, progressive culture. That was very important. So a lot of things, I think, Zubin, I can keep on talking about that for hours. Uh, but briefly, I don't think we have the luxury of that time. So I can only say that, there are a lot of so-called administrative personnel job that I had to get involved, whether starting the transport department, starting the canteen, starting gardening, security, all those things were there. At the same time, I didn't lose sight, because being, one young, I would say the executive straight from the campus, my focus was also there. How do I ensure that performance management process is set up? How the training and development to be done there, and each and every walkman used to be given feedback by their supervisors. That's the kind of culture we built. And I still remember that I was the only one chosen to come to the corporate office and make a presentation during that engineers meet, and we got a standing ovation for the kind of cultural initiative that you had taken at the plant. At the same time, we had the issues where suddenly we got a call that one workman actually lost his finger, met with an accident. So I had to take him to the hospital. So the workman was howling, sitting next to me, profusely bleeding, and I was carrying his one finger in an ice box, and then spent the whole night sitting in the hospital to see that the operation is done well and he's actually fit and fine thereafter. So yeah, as I said that, okay, stories can go on, so I have to put a stop here.
Right. So, what I wanted to ask next is again in terms of the work that you've done. I also saw that you worked in Oracle. So you transitioned into Oracle from Eveready. So how was that? Because you moved to the software industry organization. Was that a smooth transition? What did you have to learn and learn again when you made that change?
Yes, this transition was also quite different, because I didn't join Oracle in the HR function. It was not only a software industry, software organization, but also the role was a technical. It's a techno-functional role. I joined there as a part of their global support center for for supporting the Oracle HRMS ERP using a remote management tool for their primarily UK and EMEA customers. So it was the pre-implementation, during implementation, and post-implementation support, whatever used to come, the problems, we used to solve it from India. And of course, there are other support centers there. We used to work, kind of a follow the sun model, where US guys also used to do the same thing. So it was a very different learning for me, because coming from the software background, they only gave me a few months of training, but I learned two, three important lessons in life. One is that, nothing is impossible. If you really want to learn, you can learn at any age, at any time. You need to have the inclination, you need to have the appetite for learning. And once you do that, then it becomes very easy that you can transition anywhere. And as I grow in my professional career, I realized that understanding business is probably one of the prime important factors for any HR professionals also to succeed properly. And that 1.5 years sitting on the other side of the table, when actually I am as a part of the line function, interacting with the customers and getting the support from HR from the other side of the table, is a very, very different ball game altogether. And that kind of created my mindset in a manner that today also, at every bit of my work life, I always see that what is there on the other side, and what exactly is the thinking and expectations from the business side. So I would say that though it was a short stint in that role for about 1.5 years, I think that gave me an immense kind of insight into the business side. And then I realized that this is the technical job. Probably that's what not I want to do. I was enjoying it, liking it. Oracle was not willing to let me go out of that role, that particular division. But I said, no, my heart is more towards people, and that's where my core competency. And without being mean to the engineers, but I say I don't want to compete with engineers in my career trajectory ahead. I have already done my MBA in HR, so I'd rather move into the leadership role. And that's how I asked for a transfer. There was a lot of resistance from the existing team, as I said, that they're not willing to release me. But finally, it did happen. And then thereafter, I moved within Oracle itself in HR, and spent about 4 years in Oracle, or rather, actually 6 years. I think include both the stints. And what I felt that set of that experience in that context was more like a startup. We grew from about 1,000 employees to about 11,000 employees in a span of about just 4 years. And a lot of businesses were pouring in from Europe, Australasia, UK, and that gave me a kind of different exposure into different cultural dynamics, right? So the way North Americans, the way US guys that they walk, their work style is very different than a kind of collaborative approach that Europeans that they take. So convincing the leadership of US or leadership of UK, you have to apply kind of a different strokes for different folks. And, so that I learned early in my career itself. And of course, I think it was very, very strenuous, because at one point of time, I remember it's for about 6 to 8 months, I used to support, about as good as 6 business units together, right? So morning, my time used to start from Australasia till that used to go on for general timing for India, then EMEA. And I remember that the last group used to come to office only at about 6 o'clock, and they used to continue till about 6 in the morning. And that was Oracle Direct team. So that team was mostly like a sales team, selling high-end Oracle products to C-level customers in North America. And again, different stories as to what was the expectation from my leadership team, and how I kind of managed to balance between all the geographies. And sometimes I used to come back home at around 10 o'clock in the night, had my dinner, and then my US counterparts used to get up. A lot of queries used to come. So again, getting to work till about 2 o'clock, 2:30. So that's the kind of a journey that I have had, but thoroughly enjoyed. Of course, I had a lot of energy that point of time that kept me going, but thoroughly enjoyed that state. And interestingly, I think setting up of all systems, processes, kind of a standardization during this huge growth phase from 1,000 to 11,000 people was a kind of relishing experience for me, even if I look back.
Yeah, and I saw that after your stint in Oracle, if I'm not wrong, you moved to Asian Paints, and I was just, when I was looking through your profile, I was wondering, from Everready to Oracle to Asian Paints, and the kind of experience you've had in different organizations, different industries. So now I'm very inquisitive to know what kind of role did you play in Asian Paints? Did you face some challenges there?
Yes, so you are right, and I think moving from Oracle to Experience was a very, very different ballgame again. So I spent about 8 years in Asian Paints, and for first 4 years was playing the HR business partner role for the largest BU, which is the decorative business unit, which brings about 80% of organization's revenue. And then I was promoted to head the corporate HR for how many COEs? The COEs were recruitment, performance management, compensation benefit, then your campus recruitment, HR, IT, which the the COEs which I started as a talent management. Talent management was another COE which I started, and of course the general administration. So about 6 to 7 COE that I was handling. So which was as good as the head of HR at that point of time. But of course, I was reporting to the global head of HR, who was the VP HR at that point of time. Very, very different and very, very satisfying experience. I think that without those 8 years of Asian Paints, I wouldn't have become what I am today. So great learning. So while I learned one aspects in Oracle, and it is almost the other end of the spectrum as to what I learned in Asian Paints. So I always believe that for an HR professional, if you really look, there are just 5, 6 subjects: performance management, training, recruitment, so on and so forth. But all the theories and everything, people are constantly struggling, right? That HR in every company, they are struggling that, okay, how we can move from good to great or make it better, or how do we address those challenges. So it's very, very important for an HR professional to understand that none of those sub-functions or theories would be relevant if you don't contextualize in the context of business. So different organizations at their different, phase of business life cycle would have a different HR challenges. So for example, that if you really look at startups, their decision making has to be very fast. You cannot have standardization. You have to probably take calls and actions extremely fast and smooth. You cannot be thinking about parity, what will have the implications, so on and so forth, right? Because otherwise your business will not survive. But as you move and you become a kind of a mature organizations to extremely mature organizations, you will slowly realize that the role of HR also becoming to create processes, standardizations, parity, SOP, and then you will align your HR processes in such a manner that you have to manage that scale and the stability. So it is very, very important those how you look at those spectrum, and then you align different HR processes accordingly. So Asian Paints, I would say, that was an extremely mature organization. So starting from its leadership, starting from the way HR's processes are set, the kind of expectation was very, very different than probably what I have had in Oracle. Oracle was a very, very volatile, uncertain, quick, fast, because we are setting up like a startup. But Asian Paints was not like that. So any decision that you take, you have to go back and say, okay, what did happen probably in 1980s when the Bhandup plant was under fire, and what happened when that decision was taken, what was the IR decision, IR implication happened, how would employees feel, how would unions react, so a lot of things. So that's why in such an organization, what is very important is to define your fundamentals, define your principles, and then stick on to that. Not so many organizations can afford to do that. So I think this is a great learning for me. But as along with the learning, I think one of the greatest contributions which I can think of is where how HR can play a role even beyond its HR boundary and can make a difference in the business. So it was about customer service management. This again, the context will take some time, but I don't know how much time we have, but very briefly, if I can tell that this is where our so-called the delivery system that was happening from the plant to our DCTC to our depot, and from there to our about 30,000 customers who are the dealers. So there is a business change that happened, saying that we would like to professionalize this supply from our own employees through a CNF agent. And that created a huge moral issues of our customers. They were not used to suddenly with a kind of a process-oriented system. So their personal kind of importance from Asian Paints went down, particularly the big dealers. So that's where, I think I did kind of an intervention, which not only helped, the bringing in a larger customer orientation mindset in the organization, but the CNF agents, they got trained, they got professionalized, And most importantly, at the business, you see that the whole mindset of those dealers, 30,000 dealers, that got changed over that time. And as a result, there are a lot of futuristic interventions from the business point of view, whether it is a centralized order taking, or we talk about the dealer portal, online payment. These things were unheard of in the year 2006, 7, 8. Those things we were able to push it, and things are so smooth thereafter. We call this initiative as Samadhan, or the solution. And it was actually a business initiative. It was completely driven by HR. The issue was identified by me. I was asked to look at the training of the CNF agents, but I didn't stop there. I said, okay, let me go, one step further, deep down, and did a kind of dipstick survey in Bangalore with about 100 dealers, and then realized these are those business issues, and then posed that business solution, and then for about 1 year, we did this whole intervention. So very, very satisfying experience, which is beyond HR, I would say. But of course, I mean, as a result, I was also put in some of those other groups as a part of their company strategy group to revamp, the decorative business units, looking at 2030 at that point of time.
So from Asian Paints to Spencer's, for example, uh, did responsibilities change? I mean, again, what I hear from you about Asian Paints, that was an experience that really added a lot of value to your career. What about Spencer's? Again, how much time did you spend there? Did you have same kind of responsibilities or something different?
Yeah, Spencer's was again a different ballgame. As I said, that moving from a kind of FMCG to now pure retail, right? And if I look back, Zubin, I think when I transitioned from Asian Paints to Spencer's, in terms of the scale, that increased significantly. I had a team of about 60 members of HR team, spanning across about 125 locations of the stores across India. But this is one aspect. But in terms of the business, this is the first time in my life, I joined an organization where business point of view, it is not a market leader. Whether you talk about the Eveready, whether you talk about Oracle, whether you talk about Asian Paints, they are all market leaders. So when you work with a market leader with a cash-rich situation, the kind of thought process that you have from the organization versus when your business itself is kind of I would say trying its best to break even in a situation and compete with the competition, the ball game for HR will be very different. So in that, nothing comes as important as the business itself. So Spencer's gave me enough orientation to understand the nitty-gritty of business, the levers of business, which will actually ensure that how you can move your I would not say profitability, but in terms of your top line and bottom line from one step to another. So HR had to be involved in those discussions, of course, at a senior level. And I remember we were struggling to move our category margin from 18.5% to 19.5%, because we realized that this 1% margin in the category was going to move us towards that threshold of breaking even. And similarly, how HR, the manpower cost, can also make a difference in moving to this direction. Those are the things were extremely important, and then I learned kind of nuts and bolts of business there. So while I was managing a huge team, about 4,000 plus employees across, but of course the employee profile was very different. We talk about Spencer stores, where people will be coming from the background where they are probably 10th or 12th pass. They were coming from a very, very economically not so good families. So how you can still be sensitive towards them, ensure that okay, you make them payment properly, you give them salary rightly, you revise your minimum wage correctly, at the same time, how you can save cost by way of being more productive. So it's a very, very different exposure. So, and how to keep the morale of the employees up is also very, very important. The kind of initiative I had taken in Asian Paints in terms of the, let's say, employee engagement, I would say it's kind of remarkable, pioneering. Uh, I would not think that many, I can't even think about any other organizations taking that kind of employee engagement initiatives. But the kind of employee engagement, so-called employee engagement initiatives that is relevant for Spencer's would be very, very different. And I would not call them employee engagement, it would be employee connect. But those employee connect initiatives are extremely important for keeping the morale up at the store levels. But if you apply the same employee connect initiatives, which mostly the others are doing, in Asian Paints context, people will say, "Oh my God! Again, HR has come with Rangoli activities or so many other things." So, as I said earlier, that business to business, your HR orientation and intervention would vary, and yeah.
So from there again, moving on to Zeiss, again very different. So from Everready, okay, I understand Oracle, uh, and then you move to this, Asian Paints, Spencers. Now again from there to Zeiss. And what I understand that you were responsible for the entire human resource function in India for Zeiss. And how did that maybe change you? How did that add new things to your perspective?
Sure. So yes, you are right. So I was responsible for the entire HR function pan India for Zeiss India. And there are 5 businesses. So of them, I think 3 were B2B and there are 2 which are B2C. And if from a consumer point of view, those B2C are the kind of top of the mind recall value that they get as far as the Zeiss is concerned. But from the business point of view, these 2 B2C businesses, one is your spectacle lens, another is your lens for the camera, binoculars, and so forth. They bring in even less than 10% business, both in India as well as in worldwide, right? So here, the span of control was not as much as probably what I had it in Spencer's, but the complexity was very high because there are 5 different businesses. Then there are 3 plants in India. There are software centers, development centers, global IT team, global manufacturing and export. So managing that complexity was a huge task. And also at a leadership level, when you are talking about this, the head of HR role to look after all the businesses, what also becomes very important is that how do you manage your stakeholder. So this is a great transition in the learning that apart from just doing and delivering, managing stakeholders, not only in India, multiple stakeholders in India as a part of the leadership team, but also in an MNC context where there is a kind of, quote unquote, metrics, kind of a structure. There, how you get the visibility outside your country, beyond the boundary. How do you really influence people, and drive your agenda, both not in India but some other countries? It's extremely, extremely different learning and ballgame altogether. So there are 3-4 kind of revolutionary, I mean, in the Zeiss context, it's a very revolutionary initiative that we had taken from the India context. And I remember that when the audit team, they came in and they actually did the audit and they said that, we have audited about 40 countries of Zeiss, but we never found such evolved HR in any other country. So that's also the thing, that when your product is so good, your brand is so strong, and your whole focus is in terms of your engineering and innovation and R&D, then you tend to lose or give less focus in functions like supply chain, HR, marketing, so on and so forth, because your products are sold automatically, right? But I think I had an opportunity saying that because HR was not so, I would say, evolved, so there are a lot of stuff that I could do in terms of revamping the performance management system, creating the whole L&D framework, then putting in place a kind of e-learning, not only a model but the culture, being a part of the APAC team along with the corporates, so on and so forth. But the compliment that I got that, this is kind of one of the best HR, which I would not say that it was still that great HR, but that was the kind of relative assessment of the corporate audit team. But one thing I would say that just after my joining, one of the mandates that was given by my boss, that managing director, he was a Brit, that to look at the performance and productivity and relook at the performance management system. I wanted to do that in India. But then when I was there at the corporate office, I realized that for US team, the whole US geography, they were also similarly looking at that, and that work started earlier. So I kind of pushed myself and said that I also like to be a part of that project team. And eventually we worked for some time, few months, and 50% of their whole way of working in terms of the performance management design they were thinking of got changed based on the recommendation that we provided, based on what's the kind of work that we are doing it in India. And eventually we launched the performance management system, which was also using our IT system, which was an automated system on the IT platform, using our own IT team in Bangalore about a year before than the US team could do so. So once that happens, you build your credibility, and then a lot of requests started pouring in from countries like Germany, Japan, China, Singapore, saying that we wanted to also copy what you have done in performance management system in India. So that's how it happened. So this is also an interesting aspect in an environment like that you do a good work, and internally people will be there who would like to know. Similarly, there are lots of time when I would reach out to other countries saying, okay, you have done this work good, so can you share it with me? So in an organization, how you share and learn and grow is an important factor. And I think that principle would be true among the HR professionals as well, that between companies, that how would you share, this is how we are going to do things, can it be done better? I think only when we are open enough to share our insights and experiences, and would also keen to learn from each other as a fraternity, as an organization, as an individual, we all grow.
Right. So again, from Zeiss, and this was the last leg before you joined Star Cement, where you were part of the CRISIL's HR leadership team. And I saw that you were driving strategic and transformational projects and talent agenda. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that, and also, what role do you see HR strategy would play in the near future? I'm just trying to connect that question based on the role that you played in CRISIL, and maybe your overall perspective on HR strategy.
Yeah, so in CRISIL, it was very, very kind of specific projects that I worked on. So again, I'm saying that it is important to understand the context of the organization, that in CRISIL is again an organization where they are the market leader in terms of their leadership in the financial domain, and culturally also quite good in terms of the kind of value that they give on the people front, starting from the CEO, Ashu, till all the leadership team members. But still there is one kind of innate, I would say, kind of satisfaction and a kind of arrogance that is there in the organization, is that we are the best and we are the financial geeks. So I know the best, and this is how I do it. So working in an environment which probably would be similar to high-end consulting firms or iBanks, etc., that how HR can play a role and make a difference. So that's where I think we had to do, as a part of my project, I did intense interaction with the leadership team as a part of the change management process also to, understand that where the business is and where actually the threat is coming from, from the future point of view. I think when you do that discussion constantly with the businesses, that point of time, businesses also understand that so-called that complacency, unknowingly what they kind of moved into. So that has to be kind of, they have to come out of that. So we keep on hearing, a lot of new technologies coming, Python, R, AI, ML. But CRISIL as an organization never thought about those. So, during this conversation came up that if you have to really sustain business the next 3 to 5 years point of time, then technology is going to play a huge role, not just your financial, domain knowledge or leadership would bring you that business, and you continue to, keep your leadership position ahead. So the whole capability building and the L&D strategy had to be realigned, relooked at, changed, keeping in mind that how are you going to be future ready. So in an organizations where it's a very domain specific learning that used to happen, and there within that domain, what are the changes that is required, what is the kind of a systems and process that you're bringing, so that the culture of learning also kind of creeps in the organization, and the leadership teams, they take the responsibility of that. That was the role for that project, that how do you do that. However, these projects individually would not make the larger impact in an organization unless you are integrating with the other functions. So the whole performance management system was also needed to be realigned, and we actually moved away from so-called bell curve model to kind of absolute performance evaluation process, and that is one aspect. And another aspect was how do you bring in more conversation, a culture of development, a culture of growing people, so on and so forth. So there again, the managers, the leaders, they have to take extreme ownership in this whole process and ensure that it doesn't happen only in pockets, but it happens across the organizations. So it requires a lot of mindset changes, particularly from the leaders. So that's where I think HR played a huge role, and to bring in those kind of sustainable and continuous change initiatives, working with the leadership team. And that's the second part. And then there is a third one, I think, which was a program called CCAP, CRISIL Certified Analyst Program. So if you really look at many organizations, it's very easy for you to go to the market and buy talent. But this question of buy versus build, always a kind of an important aspect, that how do you balance this buy versus build aspect as far as the talent is concerned, so that your organization is not only future ready from the succession point of view, but also continuously you are growing homegrown people who they would be more aligned to your culture, they would be more aligned to your processes, knowledge about the organizations, and that's the kind of a right leadership team you would like to have eventually. So the CCAP program was aiming at that. So we kind of thought of tied up with IIM Calcutta, and then say, okay, how do you design that program? So that's the third aspect. But one of the important, I would say, societal, benefit out of this happened is that we decided that we're not going to take people only from the B schools, we're going to take people who are probably plain graduates. So these graduates, and then how do you train them through your CCAP program for about 1.5 years, so that they become as good or if not better than your MBA graduates from best B schools. So, and if you are able to do that, you are doing a lot of goods, to the society as well, because not necessarily everybody would be able to go to IIMs, but if you get an opportunity where organization is spending money and also providing them opportunity and exposure, um, it is good for the society as well.
Right. Since you were talking about fostering a learning culture, when you're discussing your experience in FISIL, I thought I'll just put this question forward now. Of course, in general, when I ask this question, how important is it for organizations to foster a learning culture? And the answer is yes, it's important to do so. But what I would also like to ask you is, as part of the HR strategy, um, I mean, of course, it's important, but how do you foster a learning culture? Are there certain challenges that you would face to foster a learning culture in an organization? What could be those challenges, and if you have faced them, how did you resolve them?
You know, so it's about culture, right? I think I would put focus more on the culture part. And, in a layman's term, what exactly is the culture? People would understand that what they see, that when a majority or most of the people are doing it in a particular manner, that's how the culture sits in, right? So as it is always said rightly, that culture is always top driven. So unless the leadership team at the top is interested um, on a particular culture, you cannot have a culture which is contradicting with the leadership's thought process. So culture initiative has to start from the top with the leadership. Now, as I'm saying that in a different organizations, you will have a different kind of philosophy, different kind of leadership, and that also might depends upon either organization itself, industry itself, and the third would be in terms of that which phase of the business life cycle your company is, as I told earlier as well. And you would see that the profile of your leadership will also kind of will echo or resonate with that context. So if you really want to look forward, I'd say that the job of HR has to be a little futuristic, saying that how can I look at business from the future point of view and then align talent, including leadership and the HR process towards that future. I think that's where I think only you'd be able to make a larger impact in an organization. So that mirroring of what is going to happen in future, that and telling that what brought you here may not take you there, that is very important when you are talking about changing mindset of the leadership. So I think that's where it has to happen, and then the methodologies are very different. One thing is internally you do that. Second thing is, how do you do a kind of a leadership development program? Only program doesn't help, and then how do you show that business value of that in a both medium to long term perspective? And then probably interventions like coaching, etc., would also help in terms of shaping the minds of the leaders, and then you take it forward the down, right? So that's the continuous process. But at the same time, that what is expected from HR, that okay, you show some quick results. So how your training and development processes or the training and development system or the initiatives also kind of touching upon not just leadership but the mass, the employees at the front line and the middle line is also important. So the way I look at it, I think kind of this model of Ramcharan's model of leadership pipeline is an extremely powerful one. If you take that, then the question is that when you look at your strategy and you say there are multiple things, that build versus buy strategy you look at what's your overall talent quality across the organization, where the quality probably is very good and where probably there is scope for improvement. You also assess that, and then you decide your strategy, what needs to be done, and of course your business projection from both short to medium term, right? So there are multiple things that would go into deciding what are the kind of approaches that you would take it, right? So in one of the organizations, I decided that if I really do the small capability enhancement of all the employees, even at the starting with the front line, the sigma of that is going to have a huge impact on the organizations. But there are organizations where I would say that my front line is good enough. Maybe I had to really put not just Sigma, but quite a good amount of initiative of capability enhancement, either at the middle management or at the top management. So it will vary from organization to organizations. But assessing, doing the right diagnostic is very important for HR to foster any learning culture. And it cannot be the same for same organization.
So I'll just change the flow of the discussion a little bit. I'm going to go back to your experiences, and I would like to ask you a question related to your overall experience, your overall career journey. You've worked in different industries. You've worked in some of the really big brand names in terms of the companies that you've worked in. So based on that, if I ask you overall in your whole career, you've learned so much, and today and in the near future, what are the required competencies in HR professionals, according to you?
I think I'll talk about probably three fundamentally. One would be your business acumen, because HR eventually has to contribute to business. And then I would also see your conceptual clarity as to whatever you are doing in HR. Unless you are striving towards excellence from a concept point of view, then I think you will only follow. Right? But having had these two, I think the most two important competencies that I would think of would be your empathy and common sense. If you are looking things from the empathy point of view, then you are not only catering to the needs of the employees, but you are catering to the needs of leadership, stakeholders, customers, all. You have to be empathetic. Second thing is your common sense, because many times we talk about a lot of jargon and probably copying some complex processes and concepts, but again applying the common sense to see what would work and what would not work and why it would work. You'll often find that 80% of your problems are solved if you apply your common sense.
Right. So I'm just opening up the chat for questions. I am already getting some questions in the chat box, but if you've not asked your question yet, you can do that. I've got a question from Gaurav, and he's asking, "Dear Sudipto sir, very impressed with your futuristic HR initiatives in your previous organization." Of course, he's asking about practice of Asian paints. I don't want to put it that way. I would rather want to keep it as an open question. So he wants to know about the HR challenges that, well, we are already facing to some extent right now, and we would be probably facing in the future. But how can we keep the workforce motivated, engaged, productive, in spite of challenges? I mean, what we are facing right now is, of course, an unprecedented challenge. But we do face different kinds of challenges over time, and in your career, you've also faced that. So are there certain ways of saying, okay, this is how we can keep the workforce motivated, engaged, and productive?
Yeah, I think the formula or approach would be the same. What was there earlier, what is there today. And even if you go back earlier, that when even Maslow or Herzberg or Brooms or Alderfer, whatever, they talked about the motivation theories, right? They talked about the first thing is your basic, right? So it's basically physiological need to safety need and esteem need and so on and so forth. I think that is true even today. I think it's even more prominent today. That look around, and I think all of us are talking about that first question, that are we going to be safe? Are you going to have our life as it was earlier, right? Everybody is scared. So that is the first thing, right? So I think that has not changed, but I think this pandemic has brought in that aspects to remind us that don't forget basic and fundamentals. So go back and check that. So that's one. So I would say that when you talk about motivating employees, you know, all motivation or engagement, if you talk about, you really can't motivate a person who is extremely scared of his existence, right? In terms of whether I'm going to leave or not. You cannot really talk about fancy stuff to an employee if the person is not sure whether his job will be there or not, whether he would get his salary or not. So I don't see, anything beyond common sense is required in general, but it's a reminder that, we talk about different theories which are important to reflect and, apply it in an appropriate moment, but cannot at the cost of fundamentals. So how, as an HR, can ensure that your business is strong, business is in a position to, survive, continue, and pay employees is the most important one. And then the role of HR is to ensure that how employees understand that, contribute that in whatever situation. And if that happens, you need to be very, very fair and transparent to the employees. Just because business is doing good, even if and the situation around is not so good, so don't take that shortcut to say that this is the time to squeeze from employees as well, right? So I understand there are businesses which are struggling to survive. There you don't have the option. Employees also understand. But when your business is in a position to probably, either it's a cash reach or it's still having money, and that point of time, if you are able to show employees that employees is the center of our thought process because they are going to drive the organizations forward, then don't cut salaries, don't cut jobs, and that is going to give immense moral and satisfaction to employees of us. And of course, there are other ancillary so-called relatedness aspects are there where you do a lot of initiatives so-called from the HR point of view that you either increase your communication, you gear up your entire management team to ensure that communication is on, or you talk about your so-called lot of programs, initiatives, wellness programs, so on and so forth. Those are good, those are nice, but not when the fundamentals are compromised. So focus on fundamentals, and then you do these add-ons as well.
I think we have time enough to take one last question. So I've got a question from Moushumi Day, and there are two keywords I got from her. One was emotional intelligence, and the other was about unlearning and learning. So going by any challenging situation we face, whether it be the one we are facing right now, how important is emotional intelligence, and how important is it to unlearn and learn and relearn things? So are we in that situation we need to unlearn certain things and learn certain new things? Or what do you think? What is your view on this?
Both are important, and I think both are related as well, right? And I think the current situation that emotional intelligence should play even larger role, because in a situation where things are process driven, predictable, you kind of run a machinery in a particular manner which goes on automatically. But today's situation, every day we are seeing a different kind of challenges, and you have to decide quickly, you have to take a different call, and so in this process, it is always easy to see that, okay, I will take the so-called right, left brain oriented approach and say, okay, is it analytically correct, and this is what is going to give me business value. That is important. But the important point is that what you decide rationally, that is not understood rationally by employees or others in general, right? Most of the time. That's why this aspect of emotional intelligence, the right brain orientation is very important, because you have to take quick decision, rational decision, but you have to spend probably equal amount of time to see that how any of my situation would have impact on my employees. And that's where your emotional intelligence will play a huge larger role. That these are probably the first time kind of a decisions that you are taking it. So what will be the impact, not only to whom you are communicating, but how are they communicating to others? What are they saying, or what, most importantly, what are they not saying in response to those? So unless you are really conscious about your emotional intelligence, you will not be able to drive it well, and it can be disastrous for the organization. So that's on that part. And other thing, I think unlearning part, as I said, that I think it's extremely important for all of us, and we need to challenge ourselves constantly. It's not so easy, it's tough, because as we grow and as our experiences gather, I think we become more rigid in general. This is the way I have seen success, this is the way I have. But we don't know what you don't know. So how are you going to challenge yourself to see that could be situations where you often don't know, and you are trying to put a kind of a very templatized lens into that, and going to act on that, right? So that's very important to always be open, always first of all, you have to be open to see that, okay, I'm going to explore, right? Only when your openness is there, then the unlearning will start happening, right? So that openness aspect is extremely important to the first aspect. And yeah, it's a difficult one, as I'm saying that, right? Because nobody else can do it but only yourself. So that's how we have to be open and then say, okay, this is unlearning is important for me, because situations are coming are also very, very different, right? And it will continue to have differences, right? Different situations. We'll continue to face different situations, and then unless we unlearn and adapt to the new situations and learn to equip myself, it will be a disaster for myself as well.
All right, Sudipto, I really want to thank for this wonderful discussion. I already see some thank you notes coming in the chat box. People have really appreciated. I've also seen comments like, we are so lucky to have somebody like you in HR in Calcutta. So it just shows the kind of perceptions people have about you now after this discussion. It was really good to talk to you, to know about you, your insights, your experiences. I hope that we can, keep connecting. Maybe again in the future, if we can have another discussion sometime. But thank you so much for your time and for your interest.
Thank you, Zubin. Thank you, NHRD, for organizing that. I must thank Abhijit, Zubin, and others towards that. And I'm glad that so many people are attending. And let me just tell you that thanks for taking time out on a Saturday to listen to somebody else's experience. In fact, when Zubin contacted me 2 months ago, I said, why would people be interested in the time of pandemic, right? Things have not changed much, but in spite of that, the situation has not changed, but in spite of that, so many people joined. So that's a great kind of moral booster for me as well. And yes, I'm also, glad and happy to be back in Kolkata. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Goodbye.